Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a 572XP chainsaw. The customer complaint is that it's not getting enough fuel. He's got a sticker on the top of here. He's probably some pretty good advice. I think he's part of a bigger crew, maybe a logging crew. And these guys identify their saws so they're quick to grab their own saw and not somebody else's. And you can see by this air filter that it gets cleaned a lot or washed out. It's kind of got a fuzzy look to it. And the inside of here is not trashed. It gets maintained. So his complaint was that it's not getting enough fuel, or not getting any fuel. He couldn't get it to start. And he says that if he pours some fuel down the throat of the carb, it will fire. Okay. Well, we're looking in the cylinder to make sure that we don't have anything else going on in here. And it's clean and shiny and wonderful looking. And we test for spark. We had spark. So we're going to pursue this lack of fuel complaint. Get this spark plug turned back in here and torqued down. There we go. Alright. You know, I don't need to start this saw to accept that he has a complaint about it not getting fuel. I mean, he wouldn't have brought it in if it was running right. So looking inside the fuel tank, I see a little bit of water, a little bit of, I don't know what to call it. It was kind of like sludge or something. Not a terrible, huge amount, but enough that it could be affecting what's going on. And if any of that made its way into the carburetor, it probably would leave some kind of a scum or film in the micro screen. And I've seen this before. So, you know, we're going to keep pursuing this fuel problem. But if you think this is going to be a video just about pulling a carburetor off and cleaning a micro screen, then you're wrong. And you're going to want to stick around to the end, because there's a lot more to this repair than just carburetor work. So I want to flush the tank out. Now I could dump fuel in there and rinse it and dump it and rinse it. This pump seems to work pretty good for like vacuuming the scum out of the bottom of a tank. You know, I just added some fuel in there to loosen things up and then went in and sucked all the ink out of the bottom. And that seems to work pretty good. So now that we have that clean, let's take a look at, see what I just pointed at there? That was a magnet in the fuel line. Husqvarna adds that magnet to pick up metal particles in the fuel. So we're going to pressure test this fuel line, and it's holding 10 pounds. So his complaint that it's not getting fuel certainly doesn't have anything to do with the line, or the line having a hole in it. So we're going to keep going. We're going to have to pull this carburetor off of here. And, you know, the first thing we want to do is take our air hose and get rid of all the schmutz that's in the way. We don't want any getting into the intake. It looks like I need a T20 bit to remove the air filter holder. So we'll buzz that off of there. 2 screws. And looking down the throat of this carb, it's really clean.
Right.
So I don't know if he cleaned it or if it's clean because he washed, you know, he said he was pouring fuel down there, right? I don't know, but it looks really good. So there's 2 rubber saddles. We removed those. There is an electrical connection hit that clip, get that off of there. There's a small fuel hose. We have the fuel return line that goes back to the tank from the purge bulb. And what else? This is the connector on top of the carburetor for some more wiring. We squeeze the trigger and then hold the throttle open so we can leave some slack in that throttle cable wire and remove that. And then right below it is the main fuel line that has a filter on it that comes from the tank. Now there's two tabs on the bottom side of the carburetor, and they kind of lock that carb into place. It's kind of nice when you're putting it back together. It holds things together for you. So we just hit those two tabs. There's one on the other side, and then the carb will come right out. Big white connector gets split, and we've harvested a carburetor. Right here is a little gasket. I removed it to show you that it's there. A lot of times I just put my thumb over it when I'm blowing the dirt off of these things. So let's open up this carb and see what we got going on. First we're going to remove the secondary throttle valve assembly. Two screws hold it in place. One piece of linkage. And then a single screw to remove the fuel pump cover. And underneath the cover we find, it looks good in there, except for the micro screen is in there, and that doesn't look so great. It's not like a big obvious plug, but there is, there's more schmutz in there. It's kind of hard to see in the picture, but kind of a little bit of a film of something or other, probably from that water that we saw in the tank. And a little bit of actual physical sawdust, something like that. I'm not sure. Again, not a great shot, but you can tell it's not clean. So, based on his complaint that it's not getting fuel, and based on what I see in this micro screen, I'm just accepting that that amount of debris in the screen is holding back the fuel flow into the carburetor and creating his problem. This is not that old of a saw. In fact, it's still under warranty. This would not be covered under warranty. I'm just giving you some perspective as to the age of the saw. So let's get this secondary throttle assembly back on here. And the two screws that hold that down. So for this type of repair, there's no warranty claim to be made. But, we're not done with the repair. Who knows what we might find yet down the road. So we got the secondary throttle assembly screwed down, got the linkage back on. Everything looks good. We'll reassemble the carb, put it back on the saw, and give it a test run, right? So look at that. Got the carb on there. I mean, there's a lot more to talk about with this repair that we don't need to go through the steps in putting that carburetor on there. Let's just know that it's been put back on there correctly, and we're going to give it a test run. So I'll put some fresh fuel in here. Prime it up. It primes up nice. Pumping fuel, that's all good. Let's fire it up. not too happy about that. I fully expected that saw to start right up based on the information that was given to me. And when you do these kind of repairs, you got to start somewhere. And right now I'm thinking, did I make a big mistake in that carburetor? Did I forget something? And right here I realized that, no, there's something else going on. Now we did find that scum in the tank, and we found some scum in the micro screen, and everything we did up to this point was justified. But I just eyeballed something else going on here. And I didn't realize it at the time, but you see there's another starter sitting on the bench? He brought that in at the same time. Well, look at this. We got a broken wire. If you've had these things apart before, you may realize what's going on. You see on this starter we have what Husky calls an air conductor, this plastic shroud. It directs the air, the cooling air that comes in around the fan. Well, here's why he replaced the starter. There's 2 pins on this starter pulley drive, and they broke. I should point out that that pulley's been improved. Now there's a 4-pin pulley. So he got a new starter. He bolted it on, but he forgot to transfer this air conductor. And you see that air conductor goes over the top of the track that holds the wiring from the coil to the carburetor. And without the air conductor in place, the wire was able to pop out of the track and got caught up in the flywheel. Now when I tested for spark in the beginning, I had spark. And you know, maybe it was the orientation of the saw at the time and the wire wasn't touching anything. I don't know. I saw a flicker of spark. I just accepted that and moved on. But clearly there's not spark with this wire off of here grounding out, and that's why it won't start. At least that's what I'm assuming at this point. We'll keep moving forward and see what we got. So big lesson here is, you know, pay attention to what you're doing if you're swapping parts out. That air conductor has a second function, and it's to hold that wiring in its track in place. So we're going to remove this ignition coil because there's not enough length on that wire to just solder it together. There's a chunk missing. I could add a length of wire and solder it, I suppose. But, you know, I would only do that in an emergency situation. I have another coil I can put on here. And actually it's a used one. We're going to charge the guy half price for a used part, because this is not a warranty claim. I mean, you can't do a repair yourself, make a mistake on it, wreck something else, and then expect Husqvarna to stand behind that. It's not a manufacturer's defect. That's an operator error. So we're going to put this used coil in here and get this starter put back on, and then we'll see if it runs. So I've got the coil bolted down. I'm using a gauge to set a 0.3 millimeter air gap between the magnets of the flywheel and the ignition coil. And then there's a, don't forget to pull the gauge out. I always double check the gap after I pulled it out. So there's some clips on this plastic track. You can see right here on this end there's a hook, and in the middle there's a tab, and on the other end by the white plug there's a snap connector. So we get the hook in there first, and then we'll put the white connector through the hole in the chassis. Yeah, we gotta get the tab in there and then push the wire through. This all would have been a lot easier to do when the carburetor was off, but you know, at the time I didn't know. So we've connected the white wires together, or the white connectors together, and now we're snapping that connection into the side of the auto-tune module on the carburetor. And then we'll put these tabs back in place and lock that all down. So we've got our coil put in there. Now, this is the starter that that he brought in. It's not the one that he had on the machine. It's the original starter from the saw. And what I'm going to do is replace this 2-pin starter pulley with the new updated 4-pin starter pulley. And luckily I had one in stock, but these things are like back ordered 2 months out. So if you see this video and you think, yeah, I want to update my starter pulley, you might have to wait for the part. Like I said before, this is a newer saw. The rope's in really good shape. So I'm not replacing the rope. I just took the knot out of it. And I'll pull it through our new pulley. Put a knot back in it. You can see how beefier that 4-pin pulley, just in appearance, how it looks. Why didn't they make them like this right from the start? So we'll wind the rope on the pulley in a very clumsy manner. And then on the back side of the pulley, there's a little bit of a notch. That notch it's kind of a catch for where the spring has to go. So there's a bend on the end of the spring that fits into that notch. You got to get that lined up with the pulley, drop it in place. Put a screw back on here. And then we got to tension the pulley. So we're just going to put a couple wraps on it. Got some nice tension on there. Then we'll pull the rope all the way out of the starter and make sure that we're not binding the spring with the rope all the way out. We should be able to pull that, turn that pulley a little bit further after the rope's already out. So now we'll put our air conductor in place, which is going to cover the wiring in that plastic track and prevent it from coming out and getting caught up in the flywheel. So I'm going to try and start this thing, and if it starts, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 572XP that needed a carb cleaning, an ignition coil, and a new 4-pin starter pulley. Thanks for watching. Later.